Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Thanks, Guru. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijan Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Nandana Brajajana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Girivardha. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Danandana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Danandana Brajajana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kunja Bihari Jayom Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Stotara Shata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Abhay Charanaravinda Bhakti Vedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakota Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai ISKCON Guru Vrinda Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya So, we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, 25th chapter, the characteristics of King Puranjana, text 13. Yeah? Okay. Sa ekada himavato dakshineshu atasanushu dadarashanavabir dvarbi puram lakshita lakshanam sa ekada himavato dakshineshvat sanushu dadarashanavabir dvarbi param lakshita lakshanam sa ekada himavato dakshineshvat sanushu dadarashanavabir dvarbi Puram lakshita lakshanam Saikada himavato Dakshineshvata sanushu Dadarashanavabir dvarbi Puram lakshita lakshanam Saikada himavato Dakshineshvata sanushu Darshanavabir dvarbi Puram lakshita lakshanam Saikada himavato Dakshineshvata sanushu Darshanavabir dvarbi Puram lakshita lakshanam Saikada himavato Dakshineshvata sanushu Darshanavabir dvarbi Param Lakshita Lakshanam. Saikada Himavato Dakshineshvatasanushu Tadarsanavabhir Dwarbi Puram Lakshita Lakshanam Saikada Himavato Dakshineshvatasanushu Tadarsanavabhir Dwarbi Puram Lakshita Lakshanam Saikada Himavato Dakshineshvatasanushu Tadarsanavabhir Dvarbi Puram Lakshita Lakshanam Saha. That King Puranjana, Ekada, once upon a time, Himavata, of the Himalaya mountains, Dakshineshu, southern, Ata, after this, Sanushu, on the ridges, Didarsha, found, Navabi, with 9, Dvarbi, gates, Puram, a city, Lakshita, visible, Lakshanam, having all auspicious facilities. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Once, while wandering in this way, he saw on the southern side of the Himalayas, in a place named Bharatavarsha, India, a city that had 9 gates all about and was characterized by all auspicious facilities. Once, while wandering in this way, he saw on the southern side of the Himalayas, in a place named Bharatavarsha, India, a city that had 9 gates all about and was characterized by all auspicious facilities. Purport. The tract of land south of the Himalaya mountains is the land of India, which was known as Bharatavarsha. When a living entity takes birth in Bharatavarsha, he is considered to be most fortunate. Excuse me. Indeed, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has stated, Bharata bhumite hoy manusya janmaya janma sartaka kari kara para upakar. Chaitanya Charitamrita Adilila, 9th chapter, 41st verse. Thus, whoever takes birth in the land of Bharatavarsha attains all the facilities of life. He may take advantage of all these facilities for both material and spiritual advancement, and thus make his life successful. After attaining the goal of life, one may distribute his knowledge and experience all over the world for humanitarian purposes. In other words, one who takes birth in the land of Bharatavarsha by virtue of his past pious activities gets full facility to develop the human form of life. In India, the climatic condition is such that one can live very peacefully without being disturbed by material conditions. Indeed, during the time of Maharaj Yudhisthira or Lord Ramachandra, people were free from all anxieties. There was not even extreme cold or extreme heat. The 3 kinds of miserable conditions, adhyatmika, adibodhika, and adidaivika, miseries inflicted by the body and mind itself, those inflicted by other living entities, and natural disturbances, were all absent during the reign of Lord Ramachandra or Maharaj Yudhisthira. But at present, compared to other countries on earth, India is artificially disturbed. Despite these material disturbances, however, the country's culture is such that one can easily attain the goal of life, namely salvation or liberation from material bondage. Thus, in order to take birth in India, one must have performed many pious activities in a past life. In this verse, the word Lakshita Lakshanam indicates that the human body attained in Bharatavarsha is very auspicious. Vedic culture is full of knowledge, and a person born in India can fully take advantage of Vedic cultural knowledge and the cultural system known as Varnashram Dharma. Even at the present time, as we travel all over the world, we see that in some countries, human beings have many material facilities, but no facilities for spiritual advancement. We find everywhere the defects of one-sided facilities and a lack of full facilities. A blind man can walk but not see, and a lame man cannot walk but can see. Anda pangu nyaya. The blind man may take the lame man over his shoulder, and as he walks, the lame man may give him directions. Thus combined, they may work, but individually, neither the blind man nor the lame man can walk successfully. Similarly, this human form of life is meant for the advancement of spiritual life and for keeping the material necessities in order. Especially in the Western countries, there are ample facilities for material comforts, but no one has any idea of spiritual advancement. Many are hankering after spiritual advancement, but many cheaters come, take advantage of their money, bluff them, and go away. Fortunately, the Krishna consciousness movement is there to give all facilities for both material and spiritual advancement. In this way, people in the Western countries may take advantage of this movement. In India, any man in the villages, unaffected by the industrial cities of India, can still live in any condition and make spiritual advancement. The body has been called the city of 9 gates, and these 9 gates include 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, 1 mouth, a genital, and a rectum. When the 9 gates are clean and working properly, it is to be understood that the body is healthy. In India, these 9 gates are kept clean by the villagers who rise early in the morning, bathe in the well or rivers, go to the temples to attend Mangalarti, chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and take prasad. In this way, one can take advantage of all the facilities of human life. We are gradually introducing this system in different centers in our society in the Western countries. One who takes advantage of it becomes more and more enlightened in spiritual life. At the present moment, India may be compared to the lame man, and the Western countries to the blind man. For the past 2,000 years, India has been subjugated by the rule of foreigners, and the legs of progress have been broken. In the Western countries, the eyes of the people have become blind due to the dazzling glitter of material opulence. The blind man of the Western countries and the lame man of India should combine together in this Krishna consciousness movement. Then the lame man of India can walk with the help of the Westerner, and the blind Westerner can see with the help of the lame man. In short, the material advancement of the Western countries and the spiritual assets of India should combine for the elevation of all human society. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Garan Shalakaya Chakshurun Militanyana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So, we're very fortunate that we have Srila Prabhupada's purports, because in all the world, there's no other more relevant source of knowledge, material or spiritual. Actually, as strange as that sounds, we go to Prabhupada's books for spiritual guidance, but as Prabhupada points out here, that the Vedic knowledge, the Vedic culture, is actually meant to provide all the necessities for a sane, prosperous, happy, and spiritually progressive life. It's not that there's a total disconnect. Sometimes because we've grown up in the Western world and we've been geared towards, as Prabhupada puts out here, that the blinded by material opulence, right? So the vision is very external, and sometimes if one is fortunate, as we see many people who have come to Krishna consciousness, at some point they realize that there's no substance there, right? And if one is a little bit analytical, one can see this, because people have immense facilities for enjoyment, but they don't tend to be very happy, right? And we can analyze this, we can see it in ourselves, in our relatives, perhaps, in our friends. Not that there's nobody who's happy, but the reality is, in spite of so much material development and so much focus on material enjoyment, the needle's not going up. Like some years ago, it was publicized, they actually had a World Happiness Index, right? Some kind of a survey, and they come up with Bangladesh, and like on top, and like, you don't think of Bangladesh, it's like sea level, below sea level, typhoons come. They have Bengal tigers that jump across rivers and pull fishermen out of their boats, and like people live on about like $30 a year, so like the average Westerner wouldn't think Bangladesh, you know what I mean? We're thinking like, Johnny Depp or this one or that one in Hollywood or da-da-da-da, right? But if one's a little thoughtful, one can see that actually all of this material development, it hasn't moved the happiness needle very much. And in many cases, it actually creates frustration, right? Very deep frustration, because the more that we stoke the fire of material desire, right? And the reality is that satisfying material desires can't satisfy us, can't satisfy the soul, right? So it's really a frustrating proposition. Like we're encouraged to try and try again and again, right? All the advertising is, if I just get this car, if I just get this job, if I just, right? Like the Prabhupada gave that example of the humble beast of burden, right? The donkey, and the washerman wants him to keep taking that next step. Prabhupada says carrying 10 tons of laundry on his back or whatever, the washerman's ass, and he puts a little carrot there, and he's thinking one more step and I'll get the carrot, right? So this is, the example that's sometimes given from the village life in India, right? But we see the same thing is going on here. Maybe it's not a carrot, but it's, the beautiful girl in the red satin dress, or it's the super sports car, or if I just pull up in this car, everybody's going to look at me and wonder, who is that mess man? COVID, But like, so this is going on, and people are not becoming satisfied, right? It's amazing, So people they notice this, and oftentimes, like sometimes they use that word epiphany, right? That if someone's a little thoughtful and they look around, they realize that this is not working, and in that state of mind, they start searching, right? Why am I here? Why am I suffering? When Lord Chaitanya met Sanatana Goswami, these were the questions he asked, and it's pointed out that this is the beginning of human life. Unless one comes to this point, human life hasn't really begun, and neither is there a need for a spiritual master, because this is what human life is all about. Unfortunately, Prabhupada uses the word dazzled by material opulence, the dazzling glitter of material opulence, being blinded by, right? People aren't seeing it generally, but gradually people do see it, and a lot of times they start searching, and then Krishna is in our heart, and when he sees that someone is sincerely searching for higher knowledge, right, it's by the grace of Krishna within, one gets his representative from without, right? So this is the system. Krishna doesn't interfere with our independence, but when he sees that one is beginning to feel that frustration and actually wanting to find out who they are, why they're here, is there God, what is their relationship with God, is there an absolute truth, then Krishna makes those arrangements. I always remember this one story from the Lilamrita. One of Prabhupada's personal servants, Upendra Prabhu, he was in San Francisco, and he was walking down the street thinking, I need to find a guru. This knowledge of Indian spirituality had started to come in that hippie time in America, the 60s. This is probably like 67 or something, I need to find a guru. And right then, a San Francisco windy, piece of paper was blowing down the street and caught on his boot. And he tried to kick it off a couple of times, and it wouldn't come off. It was stubborn, so he finally pulled it off with his hand. And when he did, he saw Bhagavad Gita classes, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Haight Ashbury, whatever that address was. But so then he thought, so he went. A few days later, he was a devotee, and a few months later, he was Prabhupada's personal servant, right? So this is how these things are going on. And this is why, in the beginning of this purport, Srila Prabhupada points out this very auspicious birth in Bhartavarsha. Why is this considered auspicious? Prabhupada explains in the purport. It's considered auspicious because there is knowledge, and based on that knowledge, there is a culture. And that knowledge and that culture is meant to enable people to imbibe a sense of who they are and what is their relationship with God and why they're here, right? And even if somebody is not ready to, become a brahmana and fully devote themselves to the worship of the deities like that, you have Prabhupada mentions here, the Varnashram Dharma. So the Varnashram Dharma is actually Lord Krishna's system of social organization, so that even while engaging in fruitive activities according to one's nature in the modes of nature, one can make spiritual progress. One can be protected from being completely deviated by the mind and the senses, and one can be properly guided, by serving the devotees, by engaging in one's duty for the pleasure of Krishna. Just like in the 18th chapter, Krishna says, by worship of the Lord, a man can, in the performance of his own duty, become perfect, right? Or like it was mentioned the other day in class, Dravida Prabhu brought up, I think it was during your class, that, Krishna in the 12th chapter kind of goes down the list. Engage in pure Raganuga Bhakti. If you can't do that, do Sadhana Bhakti. If you can't do that, give up the results of your activities for, like that. So it's a progressive path, and Lord Krishna organizes society in a way that everybody is given the opportunity to easily make progress. So Prabhupada points out that over 2,000 years of foreign subjugation, India was, the words he used, it was very interesting, but, India was the legs of progress. How did he say? The legs of progress have been broken, right? So you had this amazing culture that we read about in the Bhagavatam, we read about in the Mahabharata, we read about in the Bhagavad Gita, this amazing, amazing culture, right? For 2,000 years, it's been destroyed, very consciously, right? Of course, I remember years ago when they first came out with satellite TV, one devotee had pointed out that Star television had destroyed the Indian culture more in 10 years than 2,000 years of foreign subjugation had. So it's an interesting point, just like that example that's given of the sun and the wind, right? When they tried to get the guy to take off his coat, and the wind said, I'll knock this guy out. But the harder the wind blew, the more the guy held on to his coat, right? And then the sun said, now my turn, just gradually warmed, and, the guy got nice and warm, took off his coat. So when there is foreign subjugation, there is a tendency to hold on to what's dear, right, for dear life, sometimes even at the point of death. But people will hold on to that because, they feel that oppression and they're, holding on, whereas a little too much enjoyment and, everything goes out the window, right? So anyway, but Prabhupada's pointing out that in spite of that, Prabhupada points out in two different places in this purport, even the simplest villager, because they still have the residual benefit of that culture, they can make great progress. Prabhupada mentions they rise early, they cleanse themselves, they chant Hare Krishna, they attend Mangal Arti, they honor Prasad, right? So this is very simple life, and we had the good fortune to spend some time in Mayapur. Our children were studying there for some years. And as you get to observe the qualities of the local people, it's very, very interesting because, they live very, very simply, very simple lives. But actually many of them are very, very, just naturally, by that culture, very elevated. One time, I'm the devotee, right? Tilak and Dodi and, I get a lot of headaches, so I found out the barber up at the corner gives massage. And the good thing about India is, if you're a Westerner and you think in dollars, things in rupees, damn cheap, Baba, Prabhupada used to criticize the devotees, they would get overcharged. That's damn cheap, Baba. They're charging you, 5 times as much as the actual price. But anyway, so this barber came over, and a nice guy, he'd gotten shaved up when I come to the Dham from him, and to give me a massage, and it was Ekadasi. Anyway, I offered him a glass of water during the course of the massage, and he said, oh, no, Nirjala. I said, no, it's not Nirjala today. No, every Ekadasi, Nirjala, right? So this is like, barbers aren't considered, like the pundits or anything, right? They're not even considered the music teachers, it's like, but every Ekadasi, Nirjala, and while he was massaging me, he was singing beautiful Bengali bhajans, this is the barber up at the corner. You've probably seen him, right before you come to the road that goes, down to the Grihastha area, coming up from the Ganga. Nice guy. Next time you're there, look him up, So this is the average, villager, you know what I mean? And so, like ladies come in and clean the devotees' houses that live there, and very often, they'll be singing bhajans, they'll be quoting verses. You'll notice their qualities over time. They're very, very devotional, right? So this is the benefit. It's so powerful. And Prabhupada, here he quotes a very famous verse of Lord Chaitanya, right? Bharata bhumite hole manusya janmayar janma sartak karikar para upakar. Lord Chaitanya, in the 9th chapter, he explains that one who is born in this wonderful Bharata Bhumi, one who is born in this Bharata Varsha, should make their own life perfect by practicing Krishna consciousness. And then they should go out and distribute it for the welfare of all others, right? And so that's the order of the Lord. And we see that if one does this, what is the effect? Just like our Srila Prabhupada, our founder Acharya, he was born in Bharata Bhumi. And he was born into a Vaishnava family. His father, his relatives, specifically it was mentioned his father was a pure devotee of Krishna. I imagine his mother was too, But he was raised up in this culture. Of course, obviously Prabhupada's example is extraordinary, the caliber of Srila Prabhupada. But at the same time, just like in the Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, the first volume is a lifetime in preparation. Every stage of his life, he taught us how to live in this world in very ordinary ways in pure Krishna consciousness. So Srila Prabhupada, he very carefully was trained in Krishna consciousness by his parents. And when the appropriate time came, he met his spiritual master, right? And I was reading the other day, our dear Bhakti Churumraj passed away, another great son of Bharata Bhumi with wonderful, wonderful qualities. And I reread his book, Ocean of Mercy, because trying to meditate more on him at this time. And, in that book, he was relating so many incidents in Srila Prabhupada's Leela, and he was especially with Prabhupada during the last year or so. So, he learned from some of Prabhupada's associates. Some of Prabhupada's associates were visiting him in Vrindavan during that last year of Prabhupada's manifest pastimes. And one godbrother, Grihastha godbrother, O.B.L. Kapoor, he's also a well-known author and great Vaishnava. He was visiting Srila Prabhupada each day for some time, and they were very, glad. They had known each other since they were Grihasthas in Allahabad in the early 1930s. And there's one pastime, sometimes afterwards he would talk with the devotees and relate incidents from his association with Srila Prabhupada. So one time in 1931, I was just reading this the other day, and in Allahabad, Prabhupada was running his pharmacy, and he also had a wholesale. He was the agent for a big chemical company like that. And he had given O.B.L. Kapoor a tonic. And then O.B.L. Kapoor was joking with him, and he said, "But I want that tonic that you take." And Srila Prabhupada said, "What is that?" And he said, "Krishna Prema." And Prabhupada said, "Oh, I don't have that tonic yet. That's not available, but I have the formula." And O.B.L. Kapoor said, "Well, if it's not a secret, could you?" And Prabhupada said, "No, it's not a secret. Trinada pisa nichena, taroda pisa hishnana, amanina manadina, kirtanaya sadahari," right? Prabhupada said, "This is the formula." He said, "I have the formula, and one day I'm going to preach it all over the world." This is 1931, right? And it was also revealed there, and I always knew, but I didn't know the chronology. When Srila Prabhupada met Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, as it's related in Ocean of Mercy by Bhakti Churumraj, the next morning he went to work and he submitted his resignation. He was the manager, young man, wife, child, manager of a giant, booming chemical factory, pharmaceutical chemicals and things like that. He submitted his resignation, and his boss was shocked. Prabhupada was brilliant. He was very big position, and his boss was, "Why are you resigning?" And Prabhupada explained that I met my spiritual master. This is 11 years before he was initiated, but Prabhupada said, I accepted him in my heart as my Guru Maharaj immediately. Prabhupada went in the next day and submitted his resignation. His boss said, "What? You have a wife? You have a child?" He said, "Yes, but if I work for you, I have to naturally give all my time to you." He said, "But now I've found my spiritual master, and of course I have to work, but I want to serve his mission. And so if I have my own business, I'll be able to regulate my time more and give more time to my spiritual master's mission." That was the next morning, So this is the determination of Srila Prabhupada. And of course, we know what came of that, right? That was 1922. So what, 44 years later, Prabhupada was on the Jaladuta, right? Bringing this mission to its full fruition, right? For which we are all eternally indebted, right? So these are examples of, what this means, this birth in Bharata Bhumi, what an auspicious birth that is. So, how do we fit in? We're not, most of us, except for our dear Ramapati Prabhu, we're not born in Bharata Bhumi. Another wonderful example of birth in Bharata Bhumi. Such a wonderful devotee. I'm sure you all observe his qualities on a daily basis, and what fortune to associate with such a nice Vaishnava. So, fear not. 5 or 6 verses before this verse, Lord Chaitanya extends his analogy, and he says something to the effect of, I order everyone in this universe to make their life perfect by practicing Krishna consciousness and to spread it for the benefit of all others. So where one is born is not a disqualification. If one makes one's life perfect by practicing Krishna consciousness and naturally spreads it, right? That is the perfection. So there's no bar. And therefore we can do this, right? And we are required to do this. This is how we will perfect our lives. In 1975, Srila Prabhupada was speaking in Philadelphia on the Ajamil pastimes in the 6th canto. And he quoted, like we sing every morning, Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chittati Koriya Aikya. And he said, what is the meaning? And devotees kind of didn't say anything or fumbling a little bit. And then Prabhupada he was chastising, he was saying, you are singing every day, but you do not know, what is this? And one devotee gave the correct translation. My only desire is to have my consciousness purified by the words. Of course, now Dravida Prabhu has enlightened us further. May my only desire be to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth, begging for that benediction. Prabhupada said, yes. And then Prabhupada said, it is not my pride, but for your instruction, I will tell you, I did it. He said, amongst all my God brothers, I did it. He said, the disciple understands that my Guru Maharaj wants this. I have to accomplish this. Boss. My Guru wants this. I have to do it. Boss. Prabhupada said, that is the mood of the disciple. And he said, I did it. That's what Prabhupada did. He took the order of his Guru Maharaj on his head as his life and soul, right? And he did it, right? He didn't. That's why he went in the morning after he met his Guru and resigned, right? That's why he told Dr. Obi Al Kapoor that he had the formula, and when he could, he was going to spread it all over the world, right? This steady determination, right? This is the process, and that's why it doesn't matter where you're born. If one is fortunate, right? It was at Brahmanda Brahmite, we're floating in this material universe, but if by some good fortune we come in contact with Guru, and if we take, and Vaishnavas, we take their orders on our head as our life and soul, right? Then that's the perfection. That's the only perfection. And that, and so many examples are here. So Prabhupada, sometimes there's confusion in our movement how to prioritize things, because Prabhupada's mission was so big, right? Prabhupada's mission was so big, and like I mentioned Varnashram the other day in a question, and Vijay pointed out, we're so small, right? And because we're so small right now, we can't necessarily fully accomplish all of Prabhupada's instructions. But that doesn't mean that those instructions aren't valid. It just means that Prabhupada's vision was the vision for the re-spiritualization of this entire planet, and over time. And we see that when devotees take one of Prabhupada's instructions, or take an order from their Diksha Guru, their Shiksha Gurus, like that. Prabhupada's our primary Shiksha Guru for the whole movement for thousands of years. Very unique position. And his representatives are continuing to guide us like that. And if one finds the opportunity to take up these services, I don't want to embarrass him, but we have our Vijay Prabhu. Many, many, many decades of sincerely distributing books. He's taken this whole responsibility to oversee book distribution in ISKCON, right? Both by his personal example, by his instructions. This is going on. Dravida Prabhu, you're so fortunate. You have these devotees in your midst. How many years has he been serving the BBT? 40, 45, 50 years? Bhadranarayan Maharaj, he was temple president 35 years ago, he became GBC, right? Managing the movement. Like, it's the hardest job you can get. You know what I mean? And like year after year, day after day, right? Against all odds, right? So there's so many, Bhakti Kevin, who had popped in earlier, I don't know, 30, 35, 40 years ago, he saw a niche distributing prasadam at the college. He's been doing it year after year after year. Hard work in the kitchen, you know, figuring it out, financial aspect of it, you know, bringing Lakshmi back to the temple, distributing prasadam to the students, like, you know. So this is the key, right? Finding the way that we can plug in, that we can dedicate according to our nature, according to our interests. It's unlimited, right? It's unlimited. Prabhupada gave so many instructions, and taking guidance from our superiors, we can find out how best we can serve, maintaining the temples, going out and doing outreach, so many ways that we can serve. And, you know, just taking that, it's simultaneously the opportunity for our personal spiritual perfection, and it's also the way to para upakar, to spread this all over the world for the benefit of all others, which is the order of Lord Chaitanya. But it's non-different. That's the beautiful thing about it. It's like our own process of progress is directly tied in, right? Right? Make your life perfect and share it for the welfare of all others. And that sharing is done according to one's nature, right? Mahabharat Prabhu is in there cooking the Raj Bhoga. He's been in there cooking the Raj Bhoga for like 40 years, right? He lives 20 miles away. He drives into the temple, right? Bhaktavatsala, and I always say Bharat and Asha because I knew them when I lived here before, but Bhaktavatsala and Leela Shakti, they're running a hotel. They have 2 kids. They have unlimited responsibilities. They're driving down here and worshiping the deities 3 days a week, right? You know, so like, and this is the nectar. It's not like people are dreading this. This is their nectar. Like their week is like, I get to go see Radha Giridhari. I get to go serve the devotees. I get to cook for the devotees. Like, you know, so according to one's nature, one can find an opportunity to dive in there and serve Guru and Krishna. And this is it. This is our life. And to whatever degree we can do that, you know, that's our perfection. So anyway, it's 8:32. I apologize if I went a little over. Are there any comments or questions? Corrections? Balaram Prabhu.
Yeah, you just mentioned earlier how, you know, Srila Prabhupada could teach us a lot, obviously, about spiritual topics, but also material topics.
Yeah.
And I was hearing recently how when Prabhupada was in India, he was in Juhu, and then I think it was Hari Shari, he was giving Prabhupada a massage, and Prabhupada was talking about how in Europe there was some drought, and everybody was really freaking out. They're having to ship water in, and it's like a big disaster. And then Prabhupada was talking about that, and then he was saying, oh, they think it's all by accident. You know, this is all by accident. He says, it's not by accident. And he said, actually, there's not a person in the world who knows anything. There's not one person in the whole world who knows anything. That's what he said. And then Hari Shari said, oh, Prabhupada, but there is one person in the whole world who knows something. It's you, you know. And then Prabhupada looked at him and he said, are you just saying that to like compliment me, or do you actually mean it? And then Hari Shari said, no, I actually mean it, Prabhupada. And Prabhupada just kind of said, okay. So anyways, an interesting point.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just another, I meant to mention earlier, but you jogged my memory, which usually takes a sledgehammer. But when I was just mentioning about how fortunate we are to have Prabhupada's purports, you know, and another thing about this, there's one nice Hari story actually that, you know, generally Prabhupada's servants wouldn't bother him when he was translating because it's sacred work, and also because Prabhupada would get up at, 10, 11 o'clock at night when everybody else was asleep and do it. You know, he was preaching all day when we were awake, and when we were asleep he was translating the Bhaktivedanta purports. But anyway, his personal servants sometimes had closer contact, and Hari Sori happened to peek in, and he, took the chance and made a comment. He said, "Prabhupada, you're concentrating so intently Prabhupada said, yes, it takes great concentration to put things just perfectly for the understanding of the common man. And if you look at it, that's what Prabhupada did. How is it that right now we're sitting in America and someone else is sitting in Africa and someone else is sitting in Romania and someone else is sitting in Australia and somebody else is sitting in Mongolia, and they're understanding Krishna consciousness from Prabhupada's purports, right? Hare Krishna. So how is it that this is going on in all these materially completely different cultures and places, right? This is phenomenal. I mean, I remember years ago, the BBT got a letter from Mongolia, right? And there was a group of students reading Bhagavad Gita as it is. One boy had gone to school in America and gotten the Gita in LAX on his way back home. And as he read it on the plane, he realized this is like the most valuable knowledge I've ever found. And he, back at University of Mongolia, Ulaanbaatar or whatever, he started sharing it with his friends, and they ended up with a study group. And this is like in the 90s. The BBT got a letter saying, we've been reading Bhagavad Gita for a year, and Prabhupada mentioned certain things. Where do we find a spiritual master? Where to get japa beads? One book, one Bhagavad Gita, went there. Mongolia, who goes to Mongolia? Well, actually, Bhattacharya Prabhu went to Mongolia with Indradyumna Maharaj. I was talking to him about a year ago. He'd just gotten back, and they did Harinam through every town and village in Mongolia. It was the first legal Harinam that now there's devotees there, and they had gotten the proper approval and permits, and they were dancing through the streets of Mongolia, right? So, this is Prabhupada's purports. They penetrate the heart. There's no material prerequisites required. This is such potent transcendental knowledge, and Prabhupada has given it in a way that people can assimilate it everywhere, anywhere. Anything else, Prabhu?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Thank you
for the nice class.
Oh, thank you.
So I just had a question. I guess it's a two-part question. So you were talking about, you had mentioned early on in the class how satisfying material desires does not actually satisfy us, the spirit soul. So one average person may just say, oh, well, what's the point of doing anything? What's the point of anybody working at all? Why go out and do anything? Why doesn't everybody just stop everything and just live in the temples, So my question is, what would you, and then, what was it? When I was thinking about that, it reminds me of Prabhupada saying, in the purport, the blind man of the West should walk together with the lame man of India, or the East. And so what does that mean, in relation to what I just said? What does that mean practically? What does this analogy that you use mean in terms of...
Right. Well, for instance, with the knowledge of these, like the Bhagavad Gita, right? Krishna says that work has to be done as a sacrifice for the pleasure of the Lord. Otherwise, work binds one to the material world, right? And then in the second chapter, Krishna points out that we have a right to perform our prescribed duties, but we're not entitled to the fruits of action, right? We shouldn't consider ourselves to be the cause of the results of our activities, and we shouldn't be attached to not doing our duty. This is an important point because, what often happens, that's why you see even in a lot of spiritual traditions, there's a very, sort of like nirvana or this very okay, well, why do anything, right? You know what I mean? But the point that they're missing is that there is a Supreme Lord who's a person who's meant to be pleased, and he's actually given us guidance of how we can please him by serving him, by offering the fruits of our activities to him, by actually seeing the work that comes naturally to us according to our nature as an opportunity to serve him, right? There's that Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Ruchate, by engaging our senses in the service of the master of the senses, Krishna, then our senses become purified. Right now we can't see Krishna's form, so he appears as the form of the deity so that we can engage our senses in his service, and by doing so, we're becoming purified, right? So all of these opportunities to work in Krishna consciousness, they're there for our purification, so that we can actually get beyond the bodily conception of life to the spiritual proper conception of life, right? So when people think, the first thing is, I work because I want to enjoy the result. And then if I can't enjoy the result, why work, right? Better sit down, And then the spiritual version of that is like one wants to renounce everything. But in the 18th chapter, Krishna says, when Arjuna asks about this, he says that one who works for me is actually the higher than one who just renounces everything. Right? Rupa Goswami says, when one is not attached to anything, but at the same time accepts everything as it's related to Krishna, one is rightly situated in renunciation. On the other hand, one who renounces everything as material without seeing how to engage it in Krishna's service is not as complete in their renunciation. Like Vijay Prabhu quoted that story when they showed the picture of the yogi and that his disciples were offering him a plate of money and he was saying, no, don't touch, I'm very renounced. And Prabhupada said, you can take my picture like this because I know how to use it, right? So this is the devotee. They're not renouncing things as material because the higher vision is that everything is Krishna's energy. There's nothing that's not Krishna's energy. And the only Maya, the only illusion, is that it's ours and that we can enjoy it separately from its relationship with Krishna. That's what has to be given up, right? We don't, everything around us, including our very body, our mind, we're all Krishna's energy, right? So there's no question of renouncing any contact with Krishna's energy. We can't even do it. It's impossible, right? But if we renounce the sense of false proprietorship, right? So the perfection is in working for Krishna rather than trying to enjoy the results of our work ourselves, which Krishna says is sinful. And, it's like thievery and there's a reaction, Does that answer your question? I'm sorry, I hope it was satisfactory. Anything else? Janavi.
I was just living in Mayapur for a while, so another thought to your question was how Srila Prabhupada, I was also just reading the book by Shyamasundar Prabhu, Chasing Rhinos with the Swami, and the volume 2 describes how when they were first there, going around, they were making life members to, get Lakshmi to help develop the temples there. And also they developed a Mayapur Vrindavan Trust. So a lot of those temples in India, Mayapur Temple and the Vrindavan, Krishna Balaram Mandir, they were actually developed by the devotees from the West going out on Sankirtan and making money and sending, giving it to the BBT and sending it back also to help develop those temples. And when Prabhupada was first in, what was the name? Surat, I think? Oh, sorry. When Prabhupada was in Surat, his disciples all flew in, and they just had this grand reception for them, and the disciples for the first time saw Prabhupada in his element in his country and how much they just treated him like such a saint. And they put, flags on the road, and they, just gave him all facility to go through the streets doing Harinam. And so these big, strong, devotees from the West came, and then the Indian people started actually seriously recognizing their own culture, how much they'd been neglecting it and, appreciating it. And then, that was a whole nother wave of Prabhupada's mission, was going to India and then, helping everyone to see that they're looking to the West, but these people in the West are coming to India and they actually want to, be like you, take up your culture. And then it helped a lot of the Indian people to recognize and appreciate their own culture and then take it up. That's just another aspect of.
Okay, thank you, Genevieve. I guess we're getting there. I was just looking for one sentence in this purport, which I wanted to end with and share. It's the verse that Prabhupada quotes in the purport about Para Upakar, Lord Chaitanya's order. But there's an amazing, if I can just find it real quick. The practical effect. So Prabhupada's talking about, when he's taken this order, spreading it all over the world, and Prabhupada had this realization of, what that means to spread it all around the world for the benefit of all conditioned souls. So in the purport to that verse in the CC, Prabhupada says, The practical effect of our spreading the Krishna consciousness movement all over the world is that now the most degraded debauchees are becoming the most elevated saints. This is only one Indian's humble service to the world. If all Indians had taken to this path as advised by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, India would have given a unique gift to the world, and thus India would have been glorified. Anyway, I just thought that was beautiful. Prabhupada was pointing out how in his preaching, the most, what did he say, degraded debauchees are becoming the greatest saints. So, what a process, what mercy. Lord Chaitanya, the Guru Parampara, Srila Prabhupada, we're so fortunate. Hare Krishna. Glories to Srila Prabhupada.